What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologist claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Today, we're taking a look at a clip from The Line. If you will, please go down below and make sure you follow The Line to catch more of my appearances when I host over there. Today, we're taking a call from Amir. Amir is going to lay out his evidence for the existence of Allah. He focuses on what constitutes as evidence for a God from a Muslim perspective. We also have a discussion on empirical evidence versus faith-based belief. And then finally, we wrap it up talking about the authenticity of the Qur'an. So if you heathens want to fuck around and find out how bad Amir is at this apologetics thing, then please stay tuned.
We've got room on the switchboard if you would like to dial in and talk about whatever is on your mind. I can probably get you in the next 10, 12, 15 minutes, depending on what Amir brings to the table. Hello. Amir, welcome.
Hi, gentlemen. How are you?
Pretty good, Amir. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I saw you guys on like Instagram threads of all apps, and it was I saw one post, and then I kind of just scrolled past there, and my feed refreshed, and I was like, okay, if I see these guys again, then I'm definitely going to join their live. So next week later, here we are.
Okay.
What's on your mind?
Yeah, so basically, when I see you guys, I know that it seems like you guys seem like very genuine people. Like you actually want to get to the truth, you know. So you guys open debate for many people. You want to hear many different sides of many different theologies.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, from the Muslim perspective, we believe in like the Almighty Allah, God, the one true God, and his final messenger, Muhammad, peace be upon him. And essentially what I wanted to get into was the thought of empirical evidence. And essentially what kind of evidence would you guys use to decipher if God is true or not?
Oh, which God? I guess, you know, do you want us to believe in Allah? Are we going to start there?
Yeah, essentially. But I mean, first, before we get the actual like creed of the religion, I believe that you should establish logic first before faith. That's something that our prophet endeared. So I would say to believe in one entity, the initiator, the creator of the heavens and the earth, it is important to kind of ask you guys, what do you believe is evidence? Do you have to go into like a microscope or a telescope into space and see God for yourself to like actually have that kind of proof, or does other proof work for you?
Well, so as far as proof goes, and the subject of your particular God, I would say that there's very likely no proof that could convince me that your particular God exists. I'm very Gnostic when it comes to specific definitions. So like if you're talking about just in general, like a God existing, then I mean, we could have that conversation. But if you're making the specific claim of the Muslim God, I would say that there's nearly no evidence that could convince me that your God in particular exists.
Okay, yeah, I hear you, but I'm kind of more trying to appeal to the general idea of God before we get into the creed itself, like the actual Muslim belief. You know, I know that you guys don't want to keep me here all day, and like, you know, you guys have other callers and stuff, but I think the most important thing is to establish the belief, or not the belief, but the evidences that we have for the one true God before we even get to Islam. Like if we leave Islam out of this for now, that would be great. But first we should establish the logic of what evidence there is for God.
Well, if there is a God claim, that should be a testable claim, shouldn't it?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So then we would have processes to determine whether or not that God existed. What are the characteristics and attributes of that God? What are the edicts of that God? We should be able to use experimentation to be able to determine that that God exists, and then determine that God's properties. I think experimentation probably the best word that I would use. We use the tools that we have and the reality in which we exist to test the claim. And if that God does not pass the test, the evidential test, then I think we just say, no, we do not believe in that God. And if it absolutely fails, we say we outright disbelieve, which I think is what John was going for. And we talk about some of the theistic gods with a proper name. We can say, well, in the more nebulous sense, we can say, is there a watchmaker God out there, some deity floating around, whatever. But we know that the theistic gods of the specific religions of planet Earth, we can say, no, those have been disproven as mythology. I mean, experimentation would be fair, right? You should be able to test the God claim, right?
You should be. Yeah. That's part of establishing the logic, I believe.
So when you provide those tests in your own life to prove Allah, you've done that? Have you done the experiments, and has Allah then been revealed in the results of those experiments?
When we say Allah has been revealed to myself, I wouldn't say that he, in his majesty, has not shown his face to me. I have not seen the prophet for myself. That is the essence of the faith part of it. But first, we come to establish the logic of it. When, we see the fact that there is things in this planet, in this earth, in this universe that we know for a fact exist, but we can't, use empirical evidences to see that. We can't, essentially the consciousness that is a arbitrary, not arbitrary, but that is an acute thing that we can't see, touch, taste, or smell. So
I'm not sure
we
I
have
agree
to
with that statement. But so if I come to you, Amir, and I say, well, there is a consciousness, there are things we simply do not know or cannot explain, and that would be Yahweh, Krishna, some other deity. How would you differentiate? How would you prove one or disprove the other? And faith doesn't really work for us because we're all invoking faith, right?
I see what you're saying, but I also think that it's further down the argument for God when we come to the creed part. The first is to establish if there is a God, whether it's the Hindu gods who believe in multiple gods, or the Trinity, or the oneness, the Tawheed of Allah. First, we have to establish if there is many gods, they have created this heaven and the earth. If there's one God, it's created the heavens and the earth. So when we see things and we know the existence of things that are not there, and I'm not trying to adhere and tell you that the consciousness itself is God or anything unseen is God, but we have established the fact that there are things that we can't use empirical evidence to prove, but we know for a fact that they exist.
How do you know for a fact they exist? Oh, go ahead, John. Forgive me, brother.
No, you're fine. I was just going to ask if he could give us a concrete example of what you're talking about here, things that are not empirically provable, but we know to exist. I'm kind of curious as to what you're talking about.
Sure. There's a few things. I would say one is definitely consciousness. We're not able to exactly prove or pinpoint where consciousness.
No, we can prove and we can pinpoint where consciousness comes from. Consciousness is an emergent property of a complex central nervous system. So that's provable that consciousness at least originates from our brains, and our consciousness is affected by our brain chemistry and our brain structure. So that we know exactly where that is. Can you name another thing that we can't empirically prove that we know to exist?
Although I disagree, because the entire point of gray matter in the brain is to transmit electrons throughout each other and electricity in general. So I don't really know exactly where you have pinpointed consciousness.
So sorry. And that complex interaction is what produces a consciousness, that it's a complex interaction of our neurons and our brain chemistry that causes us to have a consciousness or to have an awareness of ourselves. So that is something that's understood. We may not understand consciousness 100% or fully or anything like that, but we don't have to in order to know that one, it exists, two, where is it located, and three, how do we explain it as a matter of the natural world? So I just simply disagree with you that consciousness is magic and that we have no evidence that consciousness exists, but we know that it exists. So is there another thing that you can mention that it has no empirical evidence, but we know exists?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you respectfully. I know that you have your arguments for that. But I would say the second thing would definitely be antimatter. I mean, there's the fact that there is nothing in this universe that we know of where there is nothing. There's no such thing as nothing in this universe as we know of, even outside the realm of the universe's lines, the infinite lines of the universe.
I don't believe that's true either.
The entire, if there's ever voids in space where light does not exist, even in the center of black holes where light is sucked and then went through an acute singularity, those pockets of empty, quote unquote, empty places without matter is filled with antimatter.
Okay. So hold on. Let me interrupt. Hold on, because you're saying, just so that I understand what you're talking about here, you're saying that antimatter has no empirical evidence for it, but yet we know antimatter to exist, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's patently wrong. So one, there's the positron discovery that was done by Paul Dirac in 1928, and then Carl Anderson experimentally proved it. So the prediction happened in 1928, and then science was able to experimentally prove it in 1932. With the positron, there's a cosmic ray observations. Antimatter particles such as positrons are naturally created in cosmic ray collisions. Instruments like the Alpha Magnetic Spectrometer, the AMS-02 on the International Space Station, has detected positrons and antipositrons in cosmic rays, providing further evidence for antimatter particles in nature. And then there's also particle accelerators and high energy experiments. We've been able to produce antimatter in colliders. Like antimatter is routinely produced in particle accelerators, such as the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. There's also annihilation events, which is when antimatter particles are created. They're often quickly annihilated with their corresponding matter particles, producing high energy photons or gamma rays. These annihilation events are direct evidence of antimatter being produced and observed in controlled settings. And then number four piece of evidence, positron emission tomography or PET scans. So this is medical application. So these PET scans and medical imaging technique uses positrons, the antimatter counterpart of electrons. A radioactive tracer that emits positrons is ejected into the body, and then subsequent annihilation of positrons with electrons emits gamma rays. Then there's the observation of hydrogen. So anti-hydrogen creation and trapping. In 1995, scientists at CERN successfully created anti-hydrogen atoms, which consist of an antiproton and a positron. And then in 2012, they managed to trap anti-hydrogen atoms for longer periods, allowing for more detailed study. And then there was symmetry testing done on anti-hydrogen particles. So the properties of anti-hydrogen are studied to test the CPT symmetry, the charge, parity, and time symmetry, and to explore why our universe seems to contain more matter than antimatter. And then finally, there's gamma ray observations in space. So like, we have a lot of evidence for antimatter, that antimatter actually exists. And so that, again, is not something that we don't have empirical evidence for, but yet we know to exist. Can you give us another, like whatever your third thing is?
Yeah, the existence of them is not the, the what I'm trying to get at. I'm not saying that they don't exist. I'm saying the fact that they exist, but we can, and even using the scientific method and everything you've explained, the fact that you cannot see, taste, touch, or feel these things, that is proof alone that there are things in this world that. Yeah,
so we can detect them. No, I just read off all of the different pieces of evidence where we can detect antimatter. So like, I don't know what you're talking about here. I made sure to try to steelman your position before I went on my long rant about the evidence, saying that is antimatter something that has no empirical evidence, but yet we know to exist, and you seem to respond in the affirmative. That's why I went through my entire list. So if that wasn't the point, then that's perfectly fine. What is the point of this?
The point is there's things in this world that we cannot use empirical evidence to exactly find. And the fact is we are living in a world that is hyper-fixated on the hyper-analytical, the actual thought of empirical.
So sorry, Amir, I'm trying to get to this. Seth, can you double check me? Like, I did ask him for, something that we don't have empirical evidence for, but yet we know to exist. And then he hasn't been able to provide one. And so now he's just repeating his unfounded claim. Is that correct? Am I following the conversation so far?
No, it is not unfounded because you have never given a reason as to, or pinpoint exactly where even consciousness was. So you decided to move to a second thing because you were unable to tell me exactly
I told you exactly where it was and how we know that it actually is connected to a brain. And then you mentioned antimatter, which I thoroughly refuted with the several pieces of evidence that we have for antimatter. And so now I'm asking for a third thing so that, you can actually substantiate your claim that you're just baselessly saying. So right now, it just seems like
it's not
you have an unfounded claim.
If I'm unable to stick to the one topic because we have moved on, and you're expecting a third thing when we haven't even covered the claims of the first one, which you asked me to just move on.
No, I mean I've already done it. Like I've already explained it. I've explained all.
Brain, no, you really haven't. The existence of electricity in the brain has not proven or pinpointed exactly where consciousness exists.
Okay,
Part of me
look,
thinks
so all I'm trying to do, go ahead, Seth. I've
no.
rambled.
I mean, I don't want to derail you if you've got something else to say. I'm still stuck over here on Allah and Muhammad and how that connection was made. What I'm mostly hearing is, let's just say there are things that we do not know or have not explained or have not found a way to test yet. I simply disagree with this idea that it's not testable or they exist beyond being measured in the physical world. And secondly, if there was such a thing that hinted to some, I don't know, supernatural other, deity or otherwise, why the God of the Quran specifically? Because all I heard was faith. I haven't seen Muhammad. I haven't had firsthand knowledge. I can't prove it. I just know in my heart. That's what I heard. So I'm kind of stuck back on the Quran. Amir, why Allah?
Yes. Okay. I think that's a beautiful question. I would say that why the Quran, why Islam, is because this is the only religion to exist to have the original scripture intact from when it was in time, when the Prophet, we say
No, it's not.
things like yes,
No,
there
it's
is,
not.
because
No.
yes, the Sanskrit of the Hindu Vedas is of a dead language who has not been able to interpret that.
Amir, let's just sure, we'll throw a wild hair out there. Let's just say that you're correct about that. I don't think that you are, but let's just say that that's correct. What is that like? Just because it's been repeatedly copied